I mean, we saw Foucault and what Foucault did with power. Does it correspond to what is being attacked by Baudrillard in Forget Foucault? Did Foucault deserve to be forgotten in that word? The point is that it's not really an argument, because he adopts entirely the argument of Foucault. He simply said, I am, same way he adopted totally Levi-Strauss. He said, I entirely agree with your analysis of society, except that we don't go far enough. And it is not primitive culture that you're talking about, it is civilized culture. If you do in civilized culture, then you're late. You're still at a stage that society has already overcome. You know, you're on the wrong circle of the spiral. So that's what it is. So it's not childish. What he says is exactly what Foucault says, but he says it dares him to go further into his own logic. See? That's in a way the beauty of the argument, is that he is not debasing, he's not criticizing Foucault. Because if you read Symbolic Exchange and Death, you could see pages and pages that follow the old Foucault. You know, the Foucault of exclusion, right? Madness is being excluded, death is being excluded, and it is the exclusion of death that he attacks in Foucault. As long as Foucault made of exclusion a gesture by which society traces a certain limit, that was going in the direction of Baudrillard. But what Baudrillard reproaches Foucault is that he excluded death from his own picture. And that's a definition that Hobbes, we derive from Hobbes. People deserve to be subjected because they don't dare being killed. They don't dare they want to be protected against death. If you expose your life to death, then the sovereign has no reason to exist. That's also the argument of La Boetie, the voluntary servitude. La Boetie developed this argument in the involuntary servitude in the 16th century. At the time, the sovereignty was being elaborated, and it was a text of warning that has become a great anarchistic text. He said, you know, you are responsible for your servitude because a sovereign is only a sovereign. So if you're not afraid of dying, you don't need a sovereign to protect you. You can be free if you take your life in your hand, right? So that's exactly what Bataille said. You have a sovereign that is there because people are supposed to be afraid, and then the sovereign itself is faking it because for him to die would mean to lose his power. The only sovereign is the one that who is not actually afraid of dying. And in fact, he's courting death because for Bataille, the sovereign goes away from the position of power in which he is. He takes his power to a territory where he's totally safe, but he's waiting for the criminal who is going to come and kill him. Right? So the only one who is a sovereign is the one who dares challenging death. Right? Okay. And so what's the difference then between Foucault and Baudrillard? That Baudrillard reintroduces a sovereignty of some sort, you know, by welcoming the presence of a risk of dying and the risk of pushing the challenge to the point of losing the power. Right? So the challenge to Foucault is a challenge to say, okay, it's fine, but death has been excluded in the mix. Not just by Foucault, but by the entire society. And that's why Baudrillard is a high modernist in this respect. He said, okay, so our society is not founded on exclusion, the exclusion of madness, is founded on the exclusion of death. That's why modern cities are just cemeteries, because they always exclude, they put death outside, they make death invisible. The only way to allow the possibility of life to be worth what it is is to reintroduce the mortality. Right? And since society, more capitalist consumer, capitalist society, who trained to increase profit, but at the expense of forgetfulness about what life is about, the only answer to that would be through a challenge to reintroduce the possibility of an extreme challenge, which is the challenge to die, right? Okay. In this respect, Baudrillard extends the 30s and 40s into the 70s or 80s. He's the only one to really use death for a certain purpose. You find that neither in Baudrillard, neither in Lyotard or Deleuze, whatever. Death for them is an accident, but is not at the center. Baudrillard wants to reintroduce the duo in which death is always present. But it is not mortuary in the sense that through death, like Nietzsche, you can give life, give to life the utmost power that it can achieve. Right? If you're afraid of dying, then you're going to look for protection. But there is in the confrontation to an adversary, as you know what happened in the Arab Revolution now. You know, in Syria, for instance, people say, well, you're going to send the army, we're going to be killed, but we're still going to be there, right? We're not afraid of death, and there's nothing you can do against that. So in that case, what Deleuze and Guattari, what Baudrillard devised as some sort of strategy is much closer to what we are tending now, right? Because what's the alternative is life and death, and there are people who, if you accept death, then you are all powerful. Right? Okay. So the relation of Baudrillard to Foucault, of course, is not exactly that, because he doesn't confront death. He only pushes Foucault to acknowledge that his concept had become inadequate, that he hasn't gone far enough in his argumentation. So let's summarize what form power takes in Foucault. And does it correspond to what is being attacked? Right? I mean, if you push the latest definition of power in Foucault, could you summarize what it is? Where is power?
We're talking about the vitalism.
Power is dispersed because it's not a triangle anymore.
Right.
And
so, but it's still there.
Yes.
And Foucault keeps talking about
well,
it.
it's outside of the person, but the person has internalized it. So, well, that's the more fear. Sorry, but they feel the power of the surveillance, which causes them to be restricted in their actions.
Right.
So they've embodied the power. They haven't embodied the power, but they've embodied the fear of the power.
Okay. So what you're saying is that power is also always a relation to something or to someone, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's exactly what Foucault comes to. He alternatively talks about power, but he also most of the time talks about relations of power, right? So power has been dissolved, but relations of power exist everywhere. Positive relation, negative relation, everything is a matter of relation. Right? So you could say, well, you know, it's a way of maintaining the notion of power, but in a context where power has become so mobile that it is present in every time a relation is being established. Every time a relation is being established, it could be established in a way that enhances a hard segment, in other words, an opposition between two terms. It could be a relation power that becomes creative and circulates in a more supple environment where one line doesn't exclude the other, right? In other words, power itself becomes as supple and you know, runs according to the various configuration that assemblage can take in society, right? So is Baudrillard actually attacking or challenging Foucault in that respect or not? What do you think, from what you read?
Well, as you're saying, this concept of power doesn't really exist, because power is hyperbole.
Well, I mean, is it a question of nominalism? Is it only the question of nominalism? Right? Is it the fact that the notion of power still maintains this idea of something that dominates, something that's above, etc.? Foucault has been trying to get away from it. For him, power is horizontal, power comes from below. Power could be exerted at different levels that can be reconstituted only when a subtle line hardens into a dichotomy. Then, with any dichotomy, a hierarchy can be re-established, opposition that are significant, etc. Power can be re-established at any time, right? A hierarchy can be rebuilt, same way a tree can come out of a rhizome, right? But running through the rhizome is the possibility of making assemblages where the temptation of building a tree could be checked. You see, but it's always a possibility is always there. And the problem is that by talking about relations of power are not defined once and for all. Every time there's a relation established, then it could turn this way or that way. In this respect, it's very close to Deleuze and Guattari. But what both Deleuze and Baudrillard question is the fact that the notion of domination itself has become questionable, right? Because the object that could be dominated is disappearing. And that's why, in a way, in this confrontation, something is not there, which is the idea that capital itself has become productive and positive. And that in any relation, everyone is being created simultaneously on a biological level. It's being created by capitalism itself, including the relations of temporary relation of domination. You see, that's why we get to the notion of biopower, and it is a very conflicting notion, but it is being introduced by Foucault in the last part of the history of sexuality, and that's why I was suggesting to read it. Because in a way it summarizes a bit what he does in what he did in Discipline and Punish, that pushes it to the next stage, right? And let's you have it? Let's read it together. The law always referred to the sword, but the power whose task is to take charge of life needs continuous regulatory and corrective mechanism. But what Foucault is talking about now is that there was a process of subjection of the subject that was exercised as a sovereign. Now, over the years, over the century, as we could have seen through Discipline and Punish, the problem of the sovereign was not to impose a threat of death, but how to potentialize life in his kingdom. Right now, the beginning of capitalism is not how to threaten the subject, but how to shape the subject in such a way that their forces to create profit would be maximized, right? So if we go from a right of the life and death to a situation where subjects have to be the life of the subject is not threatened, but it is being modulated by various mechanisms and disciplines so that they would be modeled and molded by the system so that they would produce a maximum of force that would enrich the kingdom of the country, etc. Right? So basically what Foucault is introducing is the idea that the same power that was forbidding, or that had power, now becomes a power to manage society. Right? And the power becomes a certain management, an art of regulating the society in such a way that society is going to offer the maximum possibility of profit, right? Profit for the king, profit for the higher class, profit for the entire kingdom through that. So the idea then was not to repress people, but through various mechanisms, as we saw, to put them in a position where to be alive would be to mold their body and their desire to what is expected of them in order to be productive within the context of a growing capitalist framework, right? So management became a way that was exercised both through constraints, through a series of punishment, through a series of correction of the body and birth, production of a soul that would control them from the inside, erection of a certain machine, like the panopticon machine, who could be generalized so that the flows basically would circulate without any sort of intervention, which was the best way of managing society was to generalize this diagram, right? And in fact, Bentham offered that as a mechanism that would allow the possibility of installing a liberal economy. Why a liberal economy? Because in a liberal economy, you let people free, you give people a maximum of freedom without intervening. Liberalism means that you're supposed to abolish any barrier because the law, the economic law are being such that there was a balance that would be established according to the nature of the system, and without any intervention, it will work in the best possible way. So of course, the first remark is that Bentham's mechanism first had to be built in order for people inside the mechanism to be able to control each other, right? So the liberalism is not entirely something that is natural. You had to impose a number of codes in order for society to give itself a liberalist kind of a regime. You see what I mean? In other words, liberalism can never be pure, right? In order to install there is many obstacles that have to be removed in order for the flows to be able to circulate freely. And because the flows can circulate only in the flows goes in the right direction, right? So you have to control, you have to establish a certain assemblage of forces that would allow the system to have the maximum freedom to operate on its own, right?